Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another edition of the Tetracast. This is RPG Site's weekly podcast where we get the site staff together to talk about our favorite genre of video games. I'm the host. My name is Brian Vitale. Joining me is the usual crew. We've got Josh Torres.
Old people rise up this week. It's our week. Let's go.
Context incoming for that. We have Adam Vitale.
I have no idea what he's referring to.
We have the young gun of the group. We have James Galizio.
Hey, folks.
And Chow Min Woo.
The gods must be crazy.
So it's a pretty big week. It's back half of July. We've got the big release of Live Alive. That's, spoiler. We're going to be talking about Live Alive a lot on this podcast. We're going to be spoiler light talking about it, but we are going to talk about our impressions of the games and the features of the site, our review coverage and things like that. We also have a few other releases that are upcoming that we'll be talking about some of the marketing for that as we go into Xenoblade 3 and maybe Digimon Survive, a couple other news bits and some demos. I don't know. It's a busy time of year. It's a cool part of the summer where, well, I wish it was cooler than it is. A lot going on. We have a lot to talk about. I think we have like 4 people here. Everyone here has played Live Alive to some extent, except Adam, who is stuck playing another game currently coming out.
It's not hiding, but yeah.
Right. Yes.
I'll play Live Alive at some point.
Yeah. Well, I mean, in a week we'll all be in the same. We'll be in the same boat. We'll just be switching gears to talk about that, and we'll squeeze in Digimon and Stranger Paradise and all the other stuff that's kind of in the fringes as we can. Yeah, I guess that's basically what we're going to be talking about. Live Alive released just a little over a day ago. It had the demo, of course, a few days earlier that had some transfer capability to the main game. We've obviously talked about it with some preview capability that Chow and Paige had access to. That'll be the main topic of the week, and then we'll squeeze in some of the other things that Josh and a few others have been playing as we go through. The first shout out here is that Paige Chamberlain did write up our Live Alive review that is up on the site. She is not able to make it to the podcast regularly. She's time zone difference is insane. She's from Australia. She'll make it sometimes, but not regularly. And then also we have Chow with us. Chow is a Live Alive evangelist of some sort. And I'm sure he will have plenty of opinions on comparing the remake to the original game and all the features that he's written up for the game up on the site as well. We've got me and James, who have played a little bit of Live Alive with the remake that came out, and then Josh, who also has some thoughts on both the original game and the new release. There's a lot of ways to tackle this and a lot of ways to go on. Eeny, meeny, miny, mo with Chow. So Chow, you over the last week have been basically chronicling Live Alive almost like encyclopedically on our website, all the different chapters, all the different games. So just tell me about Live Alive before you knew that a remake was coming out. What were your thoughts on the original version of this game? And just give us some background about what Live Alive is.
I'll talk about the original version that came out like 700 years ago, Chow.
Okay, Live Alive is basically 8 different games in one. That's how I treat it, really, because it's just like a really experimental game. You want to see if a game with different main characters would work for back in the Super Nintendo days, because it's kind of unheard of. And, trying to have one universal scenario to put them all together, and, that idea seems kind of far-fetched at the time, but nowadays people just laugh at it, I feel like this game just kind of released at a time where it's not relevant anymore.
You mean originally?
Now. I'm just thinking now. Because, when I was talking to Paige, I said I love one of the scenarios, and she's like, oh, it's so predictable. I'm like, predictable? It's like, this came out in 94. It's like, what the hell are you talking about? And it's like, well, I wasn't born in 94, so... So it got me to thinking, it's like the Citizen Kane plot twist back in the day. Boomers talk about how awesome that plot twist about Rosebud is, but now we just look at it and we're like, that's so normal. It's, I don't know.
That's a really, really great point. I was thinking about this too, because so many games, directly or indirectly, have been taking cues and have been inspired from the concepts presented in the original 1994 release of Live Alive. And now, a lot of those concepts have been almost borderline done to death in several ways, shapes, and forms that I can imagine it's difficult for people to sort of place this quote unquote new game as a period piece, because to many people in the West this is kind of a new game because this never got an official release. Sure, this got a fan translation several years back, but that was by no means perfect, and because of the nature of fan translation, many people didn't get to experience that as well. So in a certain sense, like a lot of people like Paige are seeing this for the first time and come into it and seeing like what's so special about this game. It's like it's cool. Like I imagine like the cool thing about it for people is like, oh, this is kind of like like 8 mini scenarios wrapped up into one thing, and like they play like the premises that they present are all very different, but like in the moment to moment gameplay and like the narrative beats and how you interact with that, that's probably something that they're already familiar with from something that came out like recently, like a few years ago or several years ago, because a lot of games once again have taken somewhat uh ideas from this game and like implemented it in their own way.
Well, speaking of that, so this is kind of interesting. I'm completely unsurprised by this, but I'm friends with a few people in real life who are more casual gamers, which is 100% fine. They knew about this game and were interested, and it's just you might be able to predict what I'm going to say. They're like, "Oh, it's from the same people as Octopath. It has 8 characters. That's the same engine." And I'm just like, "Yeah, it's a remake of an older game, but you're kind of right. Not worth it to like correct more than that because I knew about this game very loosely. Like I knew Live Alive was a game from the early 90s. I actually didn't realize that it wasn't officially localized. Maybe it's because the fan translation was so available that people just treated it as if it had been localized. And then I guess I didn't realize it's kind of like going back to play Final Fantasy IV or other games from the same era. And we'll talk about this when we talk about the remake specifically, is that you have to try to recalibrate what a video game storytelling, dialogue, and things like that were like back in that time. And when I'm playing Live Alive, the remake, for my first time playing it, it's kind of interesting how in several ways it feels fresh. Like there's in some ways I can't tell that it was a game that was originally in the 90s. It could have just been like a stylistic throwback. But then in some specific ways, specifically in like when you have to select between dialogue options. So I've played like the Edo Japan chapter, and a few times in that you have to have a decision on whether or not you spare a life or take a life. And it's kind of interesting when a character will speak to you and you have to pick one of 2 options, and then they speak to you again, and then you have to pick one or two of the exact same dialogue options again. There's certain like fringe moments like that where I'm like, okay, this might have made more sense in the original game, that they just kind of kept it in place for the remake, where a lot of the storytelling was ahead of its time 30 years ago, but it feels a little bit more antiquated now. Antiquated is a little bit of a loaded term, because most of the time when I'm playing Live Alive, it doesn't feel like I'm having to calibrate to play a game that is like outdated in any way. I'm actually really quite enjoying it from that front.
Yeah, I've been revisiting this too. I've had about like 3 scenarios done. I did the prehistory, Imperial China, and Twilight and Edo Japan, and I'm really impressed. Obviously, from the facelift it got, there's like a lot of really neat like visual touches that they added onto this that wasn't in the original release, especially in terms of like lighting, especially like in terms of like cinematography and adding a depth of field effect, which I still think it's not like depth of field isn't a great fit for the HD 2D games in general. I still hold on to that. And this game like it's weird how they frame certain scenes employing that depth of field effect, but nonetheless it's still a visual treat, and it's hard for me to like kind of separate it from that original game, because when Chow and I were talking about it, he's like, dude, this is like the exact same game, just like with a facelift. I'm like, that's really interesting that like they left this pretty much largely untouched from what I've played too. Like there are like a few different item placements here and there. Some items are added, some items removed, but
items are changes. There are some changes to the names for the times. Like one of the example is that if you play in the Wild West chapter, there's one part where you meet like the lady over there, Annie, and she basically said, don't go around snooping in her room. And in the remake, if you do snoop around her room, you'll find her diary. I think in the original fan patch or the original version, you find her panties and you give it to her and get slapped in the face.
Oh yeah, okay, yeah, you do.
Now you give her a diary, so I guess you could say these are the changes, because
right,
that might offend somebody in current times, because it's not kind of the same type of humor, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was thinking of doing Wild West next, so that is an interesting, change to kind of reflect the times, because this also came out during a period when that was like more socially acceptable to like include in video games.
That was
era.
that was just like a slapstick gag that you could find in
Yeah.
children's cartoons and all over the place. Like
Exactly.
Even the prehistory has a lot of changes like that because it's it's all like
Yeah.
90s kind of gag sort of thing, right? It kind of
But
reminds me of like
it's like an early 90s Saturday morning cartoon almost.
yeah, it reminds me of like old school Dragon Ball. Thinking about with all like
Yeah.
the perverted jokes with like Master Roshi and stuff.
mm.
It got the same kind of concept. What is it? In the original version, you can handcraft the bag, which is a weapon that only the girl can use. And if you give her the bag in the original version, she comes out naked for a split second for a pixel, then she goes back in hiding. While in the new one, she just grabs you into the haystack, and you see a little movement, and he comes back, and Pogo's all blushing and stuff. That's in the new version. So there's all kinds of little things like that, just little subtle changes, but nothing too big.
I think the thing that really throws me off is like it does have like some quality of life changes that they added, like the mini map or radar screen, which is it's a really funny HUD because like there's nothing distinguishable about it. It's like a circle, a large gray circle with like just colored pips in it that just shows you the go this way to like go do some side stuff or go to the orange pip to continue the main stuff. There's like nothing else. There's not like outlines on the map or anything in it, which is really funny because it's a low effort radar, but it's like effective and like leading you to where you need to go next. Because in the original, you just have to memorize. Okay, I've been here and here, so I have to go here next because I didn't go there.
Oh yeah.
The
So I was playing the Distant Future chapter, which first of all, I've only finished 2 of the chapters, Edo Japan and Distant Future, and I really want to talk about like how they play so differently. But in the Distant Future chapter, it's a lot of dialogue and it's a lot of characters saying, it takes place on a spaceship. I'm going to go to the airlock, or I'm going to go to the med bay, or I'm going to go to this person's room. And like, I feel like playing the game originally, you'd have to pay attention and say like, okay, this character headed to this place. I should follow up on that. But now if you wanted to, you could like skip the dialogue and just follow the radar and be like, where's the orange, marker? Okay, it's there. Go there. Like you kind of can turn your brain off. And I'm kind of like, I feel like you lose a little bit of something there when a game just kind of telegraphs where you need to go. To that extent, where in this room there might be like 6 crew cabins and there's a little marker saying you can enter all of these, but this one with the orange mark is the one you got to go in to progress the story. You better do that. I'm just like, I don't know. It takes a little bit of the wanderlust away, where it almost kind of does it the opposite, where it's like, well, I'm going to enter the other rooms first, neener, or whatever, instead of going to the orange mark.
I think overall it's like it's a probably a net positive because you can turn it off if you want, because in the original like it was sort of frustrating in the original because you have to think about like other type periods like prehistory. Like prehistory has like when you get around to it, like it has like relatively open maps compared to other chapters, and like trying to find where you need to go as you explore around because it has random encounters and that's I guess that's one thing that I should note for people who don't know, like that like there are certain like enemy encounter systems that are different. Like in one chapter they'll have random encounters, and another one you only initiate encounters with on-screen enemies. It's not like consistent with throughout each character. Each character is kind of has their own systems going on. But that was kind of like the frustrating thing in the original. Like in that chapter specifically, it's like, where do I need to go? You keep on going through random encounters, trying to figure out like, okay, where do I need to go next? Because sometimes you might have to backtrack for something in there as well. So
in the Distant Future chapter, speaking of random encounters, there's like no combat at all except for like one forced encounter. But then there's like a computer game you can play within the game that has like 9 battles in it. And as far as I'm aware, Chow, correct me if I'm wrong, it's just extra. It's just for fun.
Yeah,
which it sounds silly to say like, how dare this be just for fun? But it just feels like games aren't designed like that. Nowadays, if there was a mini game inside of an RPG that had like a set of levels to go through, it would give you something at the end because it's like, was it worth it? I gotta respect the player's time. Where here it's I kind of appreciate and enjoy that it's like, yeah, there's a mini game, you can go through some combat encounters in a video game in the game. It's just for fun, just enjoy it if you want or skip it if you don't want to do it. And I just kind of appreciate that, like, just here to have it. Why not? It's just flavor. And it does play into the story a little bit, but the fact that they don't feel like they have to like have a carrot dangling for you specifically, I enjoy. And I think that's something that if this game was made now, it would give you something
I just wanted to follow up like previously also like besides like that quality of life of the radar like that, I just still find it really weird that you cannot like speed up like attack animations in battles.
I feel
for
that's
this
like an
remake.
oversight. I think that's why I feel.
Yeah, like it's kind of because you see a lot of games like when it comes to like remastering or remaking, like there's usually some sort of like speed up feature of like hey, you can like hold the button to like make this animation go faster, or press like A or to like skip an animation battle, because like when you initiate an attack, it doesn't take a lot. It takes maybe 3 to 5 seconds at most to like execute an attack, but that's like for every time you do an attack, it does like that animation with no way to speed it up. And like that's a really weird like design decision for it.
I was going back to say, when you play the Yakuza games, Brian, I was gonna say, like, when you go to the arcades and play those games, and if you win at them, do you get anything in the Yakuza games? I'm just using this as a comparison.
Don't they usually have those like completion points at the Yakuza games, like score you if you get like what is it?
Yeah, there's
currency.
there's usually like maybe some sort of like in-game achievement system that like you might get like something out of it. Like you there's still largely you play them for fun, but there is like a sort of mini incentive that's pretty easy to
they're
do.
literally called. I googled it just now. They're literally called completion points, and
Yeah.
usually in all the Yakuza games, they're literally just like eat all the food at every restaurant, get the high score at every mini game, do all the combos. Like they're basically like how the game tracks your percentage completion. And usually it's you don't. Well, maybe you might get some in-game like healing items or weapons like bats or whatever, but I think it's typically just for completion points. Yeah, if Live Alive was a Xbox or on Xbox or PlayStation consoles, I'm guessing there'd be an achievement for you completed the Captain Square.
Yeah,
What was it called?
Yeah.
it's Captain Square.
Yeah, you completed the Captain Square minigame. Here's an achievement. Hooray!
Well, when I beat it, the credit does say PC version staff, so
Oh,
you
okay.
there.
Well, yeah, maybe we'll see it there eventually. James, you've been going through Live Alive as well. This new remake. What do you think of it?
So I've only played 2 of the scenarios so far. I did the prehistoric one and the Imperial China one. Um, Not much else to say that hasn't already been said. I think Live Alive's biggest strength is how much it can make each of those different chapters feel unique, even if they're all obviously in the same game and have similar gameplay. Just the fact that like the Imperial China thing, it's like your main character doesn't level up and the whole thing is kind of revolving around training up that disciple, and there's no real like option for which one you go with. It's just like whichever one you train the most is going to be the one that you end up with. It's very interesting stuff. And then all the stuff with the prehistory, not the biggest fan of how that chapter feels, because like no dialogue, but I can understand what they were going for, and it's definitely interesting for that aspect.
Prehistory is the one with the random encounters too.
Yes.
No, it's not random encounters, because you have to sniff out enemies, and then you can see the tracks for the enemies, and if you walk into them, then you'll engage a battle.
I think, but I think also like if you just randomly wander around, like it's not frequent, but there you still get into random encounters without sniffing. Like I've also tried that on.
I didn't.
You can get to random encounters. It's because you ran into where the monsters are located by accident, and that's what triggers the battle. But if you sniff them, you can see it. That's how it goes.
But even between those 3 scenarios that we talked about, I don't think we specifically said this, but the one that's Twilight of Edo Japan, that's the one where all the encounters are characters on screen. And then in Distant Future, all the battles outside of like the one required battle are in the video game. And then you're telling me how prehistoric, just the fact that they work just differently like that. And then in the Imperial China chapter, the fact that your character doesn't level up, like you are overpowered as in that one. Just the fact that they can like twist the expectations in each chapter in addition to the setting and the characters is kind of fun. And I've only played the 2, but also there's a little bit of UI shifts. Like when you go to the Distant Future chapter, people can speak to you on a communicator, which gives you like this UI text box. Instead of being a dialogue bubble, it's like digitized text floating above your head, like as if the communicator is speaking to you. So I almost feel like they could have gone a step further to have like the UI shift more from scenario to scenario, but they do it at least in that small way for the one scenario with the distant future, which I thought was kind of neat.
Yeah, given now that you mentioned, like when it comes to UI and HUD, like the HUD is like when you go to like the menus and like go switch settings and not like it's weird because it gives me like that same feeling of like how those like how the Capcom game collections are when you like they have a selection of games you can go switch between game and game. It kind of feels like that HUD that they use for this game like is reminiscent of like that shell HUD like that encompasses like different games in a collection. It's like because it's very like sterilized, like even like the way you navigate like inventory, the items, the equipment, like that style of HUD, like that's the consistent thing in between each chapter of like you always know how to like navigate that because that never changes. Like exactly.
Steril's a good way for it. I was gonna use the word clean, like that it almost like has too positive connotation. It feels like a wrapper, like almost like a template HUD that you could design any game underneath, and then like change the color or the shaders or something to fit it. But they didn't go that far.
Yeah, and that's okay. Like
it's fine. It's just interesting.
First and foremost, like it's easy to navigate, and you know everything else, and that's what it should do. First and foremost. So, but it is funny. Like I do like that. Like the one thing that makes it like kind of neat is it'll take the state of the character and like reflect it on like when you pull out the menu. Like when you put out the menu, like for the Twilight of Edo Japan chapter, when you're wandering around, it's just like Oboromaru, like it is standing pose and like sometimes using like that move where he stealths himself. And then like if you're in the attic and you put up the menu, it'll have him like prone in the attic in that menu when you pull it up. It's like it does like take the state of that character into account when you pull it up. Just interesting. But other than that, like it is a damn beautiful remake. Like it is like those pixels are really really crisp.
Those pixels are really crisp.
Yes, they are really
yeah.
crisp.
I mean, we've talked.
Designs are great. And it's and like taking to like the size of the enemy into account, especially for a big encounter, like they're huge.
I love what they did with the bosses in this one.
Yeah, dude, they're
like
good.
Way too big.
They are. They're comically big, like how Octopath did it. They're just like picking up like a third of the screen with their sprite. It's like, yeah, it's funny. It's goofy.
And we've talked both in for Triangle Strategy and Octopath about how we don't care for like the post processing, like some of the modern graphical techniques meshed with the emulated 16-bit style is kind of jarring. I think it's slightly better here, and there are a few places where I think it is actually used really effectively. There is one point in the Distant Future chapter where a character is firing a gun towards the perspective of the player, like towards the camera, and it uses like some sort of like effect for the muzzle flash. And I'm like, that actually, like, it's such a small moment. It goes and passes in like 2 seconds, but it actually, like, I thought it worked really well there. So there's specific instances where I think the game looks really nice. The combat encounters, the final boss of the Edo Japan chapter, it's just like a really neat design, really cool art
like
there.
The way that it like just shapes up the lightning and how the lighting of the lightning like reflects the buildings. It's really really cool modern technique stuff. It's also really cool, like when it like messes like a foreground and background, like in the Twilight of Edo Japan chapter, when you're like traveling around the perimeter on the buildings, and you're constantly moving toward the camera and then back to the camera. Like back then, it was just like an overhead view. It never like messed with perspective like that. So that was a really interesting like shift of perspective they embraced in this remake as well.
I was gonna say, did you guys try the bad ending in the Twilight of Edo Japan?
I didn't.
You just deserted your mission and everyone's trying to kill you.
That's good. I totally forgot that you can do that.
It's like, yeah, you could just leave, and it's like, well, that's a consequence for leaving. And,
wait, does it allow you to wrap up the chapter, or does it make you reload?
Well, you have to do it. It's technically an ending, but it's a bad ending. It doesn't count as a clear.
It's a game over.
Yeah, it doesn't count as a clear, but it is an ending.
I guess I will say there were a couple times in that chapter where I did just fail. I died, and it is interesting that there is a small cutscene if you fail that actually is like, I don't know, it could have easily just been like game over, reload, but they actually show you a few lines of dialogue saying like he failed his mission, and then it goes game over. Like, oh, that's kind of interesting. That's not a lot of games do that.
Yeah, not anymore. It's just it is in many ways a game of its time, and it's like some of the mechanics that it has, but in other ways it is still one of the most like unique packages a video game has seen of its kind. Really, it's still one of those things. It's like I still can't. There are games that have like aspects of it in them for sure, but as an overall package, like there aren't many games that are like I can think of. It's like, oh, that's like Live Alive. Like sure, like Octopath is surely inspired by it, but still not quite like Live Alive.
I think the good thing about Live Alive over Octopath is it separates the character. If the characters are not going to
Yeah, the time periods
interact,
really help.
you know, it's like might as well just separate them. You know.
Yeah.
I will say though that don't spoil me on this because I don't really know, but I know that there is like a final scenario, and I don't really know how it works. Obviously, you clear the different chapters, and like on your little save menu on this sterile UI that we talked about, there's like a little badge that fills in. So obviously, like I'm anticipating in my head from like modern design, it's like, oh, you're going to do all 8, and then they're all going to converge in one thing, but I don't really know how or why it will converge. Like I don't really know what the overarching connective tissue is yet. And part of me is thinking like, well, maybe the characters will all be ported into like a combo realm, but I don't know if that would make sense because like my character from the Edo Japan chapter is level 14 and got a lot of gear, and then I never I never could gear the character from the Distant Future chapter because his chapter works so differently. So I just don't know like what's going to happen in terms of once you complete all the individual stories, what does the game do from there? So that I'm actually kind of eager to say like, I don't know, because what would they do if the game was made in modern times, or what would they have done for the original game back in '94? I have no idea. So I'm interested in seeing how that actually plays out. And even though it is kind of like a footnote of the game, maybe not a footnote, but it doesn't seem like it's a selling point of the game. It's not something I hear people talk about a lot, but I actually do think that the combat system is pretty neat and distinct, despite being rather simple. The fact that you have like an action gauge that slowly fills up every character on the battle every time you move a tile. So you have kind of like this trade-off for like positioning your character and then attacking. Or if you can move out of a tile where you know what a character's like, if an enemy on screen has an ability that shoots in a straight line, you can kind of get out of the line of fire and force them to like reposition themselves and restart their charge bar. It's actually, I've enjoyed it a lot. Of course, mostly in the Edo Japan chapter, because that one is the one that's had a significant higher amount of combat for me so far. But
It doesn't have to be combat. You chose the kill route. You could have gone that castle without killing anybody.
That's what I did.
That sounds like a lot of saving and reloading. I don't know. I was just like,
It's actually way easier than the kill route.
That's why I did it. Because I remember doing the kill route in the original. I'm like, that took 10 million years. But it's okay. So both
I was just like stealth games.
Yeah, but both ways are perfectly fine to get a clear in it.
I will say though that there's the Edo Japan chapter has some optional bosses, and I was surprised at how they were implemented into the game. I don't think I want to spoil it more than that. They almost feel like really tacked on, and there's a way you can deal with both of them really quite easily that feels like kind of cheap rather than having to have a good strategy. So it's just kind of it was interesting.
I don't think Brian used the strategy I did, which didn't work out too well.
I tried using that strategy involving like positioning with the action bar, almost like the ATB bar. I don't know if it was called in game, but I had the ally with me, the prisoner, and he kind of I think the strategy is difficult to pull off when you have to manage the two characters, and you can kind of influence a little bit which one the enemy will target based on which one's closer, but not quite. But I don't know. I've really enjoyed the two chapters that I've played have been really distinct from each other. And based on what you've said on the other chapters, it's interesting because there's like the Wild West and the near future. I have no idea how those play. So I'm interested. I've gleaned what the prehistory plays like and what the Imperial China plays like based on this discussion. But then there's still 4 others that we haven't even brought up. So I'm interested to see all the way they're adjusted.
I'm really looking forward to Wild West because that like when early footage of this game came out and we saw like an early like look at like how the Wild West would look in this remake it looks so much better than the original. It's crazy.
I was gonna say the Wild West chapter was insanely difficult in the Super Nintendo version, but now I have to say that the chapter is super easy.
Huh. Interesting. Yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing
Well,
how that looks in the remake and how that.
if I remember
feels.
right, when the remake was announced, one of the very first things they shown was the Wild West chapter. So for some reason, that art with that character is kind of like I associate that with this game now, even though I haven't played that chapter yet, because that's when if you asked me like a year ago, well, I forget when this game was originally announced, not that long ago. If you asked me before the remake was announced what Live Alive looked like paint a picture in my head, I'd be like, oh, like Final Fantasy IV, maybe, kind of. I don't know. And so now with the remake, like I just associate Live Alive with Wild West now. So maybe I'll do that chapter next once I finish whichever one I'm in the middle of now. I think I have a save in the China chapter because I played it in the demo. Okay. So I'll finish that up and then do Wild West.
Yeah, I was gonna say the Wild West chapter is super easy now because of quality of life improvements to the Switch version. In the Super Nintendo version, these quality of life didn't exist. That's why it was hard.
It just reminds you of like man, we don't really see turn-based RPGs set in the Wild West at all anymore these days. Like, can you name me like 2 that come to mind of an RPG turn-based RPG set in the Wild West?
It's a game that Adam I know played recently on his PS5, I think. Wild Arms. Does that take place in the Wild West?
Wild Arms 3, yeah.
Wild Arms 3 does. And
not
the other one gets into futuristic sci-fi mumbo jumbo.
Yeah,
it's like how most Star Ocean games take place on whatever that fell pool
rural planet
is.
Yeah, that's Live Alive.
We talked about
scenarios. There's more scenarios we can talk about, but I feel like I don't want to spoil the experience for you guys. So probably the next week we can probably tell about the full picture of the whole entire game.
Well, at this time next week we'll be talking about Xenoblade. When does that release?
Yeah, Xenoblade comes out next Friday, like this upcoming Friday. Digimon Survive will be out as well. I mean, I'll be diving into Digimon Survive because I can talk about Xenoblade already. But,
yeah, and I'll be
going to have to struggle to play through Xenoblade and Digimon Survive in time for Soul Hackers 2.
Yeah, when is Soul Hackers 2 in August?
26th.
Oh, okay, we got time. Good thing Xenoblade 3 is a small game.
Yeah, obviously. Xenoblade is a small game. Digimon Survive, but it's like multiple playthroughs and different endings, small game.
I feel bad because I don't want to be like Live Alive. Like this is your window. This is our window to talk about it. This is our window to play it.
I'm just glad that Live Alive is small. I'm glad that I can just
relatively
get it done with in time for Xenoblade, and I don't feel like I have to rush myself.
Yeah, you could be done in like probably at least having 3 days to spare before Xenoblade to come out, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, so Live Alive, I guess that's... we heard about some of Chow's comparisons from the original game to the remake. I don't know if you had any more just enlightening thoughts about what the remake does and doesn't do for this game, and whether it presents itself well or poorly in your eyes, Josh?
I think it's amazing. Like, I think that just like comparing it to the original, it's like better like in almost every way. It's one of those games I hold fondly, but I think it's a difficult game to like talk about because you just want people to like go into it knowing nothing. And I hope that it does well enough to encourage Square Enix and maybe other creators to like kind of take risks on like experimental game design like this game again. We see it a lot in the indie space for sure, but like I would like to see like we were mentioning, like a turn-based RPG set in the Wild West, and like what would a modern one of those look like, and what kind of like what is the vision people have for like stuff like that, and just like different ways of how integrating your narrative plot into game design. So like for example, like say in the prehistory era, they didn't have like ways to communicate each other verbally. But they used to have like primal instincts of a human. Like, we still need to like fart, for example. That's something that like every human being has to do. So like one of your battle moves in the game is like, hey, show your back to the enemy and fart on them. It's like hell yeah.
I was not expecting this.
Yeah. And that's something really cool. It's like hell yeah, that like more games should do this, because it's so goofy and funny and delightful. And it's like if there's something so simple and effective about that, it's like, yeah, that makes sense. Of course they would do that.
It does. Live Alive, despite having kind of a a more high level like narrative, at least so far for the two I've played. It does have a pretty nice sense of humor that I appreciate in terms of like the character in the Distant Future chapter. His default name is Cube, but he's like a robot that's very round. And the game kind of makes it apparent that that's ironic. Get it? Like it's in your face, but I just appreciate that. And the game doesn't feel like it has to be like subtle or it has to be like it's not afraid of being silly, I guess, which is kind of like I feel like a lot of RPGs nowadays have to be like, no, we take our video games seriously. We want, where this is art, and there's like just it's a game, we're having some fun, and then it still allows itself, like at the end of the Distant Future chapter, it does flex a little bit more into like the poignant sort of thoughtful narrative about how people interact with each other. And so the fact that it manages to kind of pretty deftly do both things from a game that was written in 94 is, I think, pretty remarkable.
Yeah. I was going to ask you, Brian, do you remember the password, or did you need the flashback to help you?
The password, or the when the guy asks what your original name was?
Yes. Did you need the flashback to help you, or did you actually answer correctly?
I thought I remembered, but I needed the flashback, and I used the flashback to confirm that I remembered.
The flashback does not exist in the Super Nintendo version. You cannot use a flashback. If you forget it, you had to start the whole scenario and watch the intro to remember that.
That quality of life.
That's so funny that they added a flashback for that.
That is kind of cool, though, how it's like, hey, no, you have to remember that. I mean, I understand why they made the quality of life change, but it's like, man, that's kind of cool that they expected the player or had enough faith in the player to remember that.
I mean, even if you didn't have a flashback, you'd have an autosave. I'm assuming the autosave is
the autosave doesn't exist in Super Nintendo.
Right.
If you answer it wrong, you're dead. So.
Autosaves on Super Nintendo. What is this?
It's like, what era is this, guys?
Yeah, just to think about like this adds skill descriptions, and like they didn't have that in the SNES version either.
Oh, that reminds me, another very simple thing. So I was doing the Captain Square or whatever it is, mini game, and I looked up what it, because I wanted to look up like what it was. You have to do this. So I did look it up, and there's like people who wrote about it from the SNES version, and I guess in the original game, the enemies, when you show up on screen, they'll have their name show up but then disappear, and you can't check what the enemy title is again. And there's one battle, I'm gleaning based on the way the battle was described. There's one battle in the game in the Distant Future chapter. You're fighting a bunch of star enemies. Only one of them has a different name that is the one you have to target. In this version, it's just hover your cursor over the name, find it, and attack it. But like it seems like in the original version, it was like a memory sort of thing. Like, do you remember which one you had to attack because its name showed up for a flash and then disappeared? I don't know, but it might be one of those things where it's like an expectation nowadays that you can see what the enemy's name and health is in the middle of a battle that might have not been there before, which kind of like undermines a few of the little tricky things that it was trying to do specifically in that chapter.
Like I don't remember this. Chow, you probably remember. Like you don't even see like how close the action gauge is for an enemy until they like can attack again, right? Or can
it was invisible. But the thing is, in the Super Nintendo version, was all the enemies shared the same ATB gauge. So if there's like multiple enemies, they share a turn. So that's kind of like the difference here. But now you could see everyone's gauge, so it's a little different.
Okay. Yeah.
I think a way to describe it's like Final Fantasy IV. You know how there is an ATB gauge, you don't know where it is, it's invisible. But as they re-release the game, you could see the ATB gauge now, right?
Yeah.
I'm feeling kind of sheepish. I'm like, you couldn't always see it because I've only ever played the GBA version or something.
So yeah,
no, not in the originals.
It's like maybe we're just too boomer, man. Well, we say it's too hard back in those days, but
yeah, now people are gonna like it was hard for you, how it was so easy for me today. I'm like, all right, okay.
It's like the Elden Ring meme. Do you know that one with the with a UI where they added all this shit to it? And you play the actual Elden Ring, there was nothing. You know, it's like the same kind of concept, I would say.
This conversation is reminding me of like how much white hair I have. I looked at myself in the mirror yesterday. I'm like, man, I have so much white hair now. Oh,
old dudes rise up.
Yeah. Finally, our week. Old people rise up.
Well, we will follow up with Live Alive as time permits in the upcoming weeks. It'd be cool to kind of reconvene at some point down the road when we have people who have played more of the scenarios and maybe go a little bit more into spoiler-like territory. But we all also, as we've alluded to, know that our schedules are going to get busy as Xenoblade, Digimon, Soul Hackers, and all those other games start releasing. At the very least, we'll revisit back in the end of the year, where we will have the enviable task of discussing where we slot this game amongst the end of the year stuff. Is it a new game? Is it a remaster? First original localization? We're not going to make that decision here, but it's something we will have to. We're kicking that can down the road. We'll have to make that decision at some point, depending on how we feel about it. Collectively, whether we think it's worth ranking or not. So stay tuned on that front. So there are a few other games or demos that released this week. I haven't played anything else other than Live Alive. I guess I did finish. Didn't finish. I mentioned last week on the podcast that I was playing through Sunbreak. I did finish the main scenario, and I went into a little bit into the end game, enough to get a taste of it and be able to put it down. Maybe I'll follow up as if they release more live content for it. We have a couple things also listed here that other people have played. The first thing listed here is Josh has touched on the SD Gundam Battle Alliance demo. Now, Josh, help me out here. I know last week we talked about SD Gundam G Generation something. That's not this game. Eternal.
Yeah,
this is a different SD Gundam.
Game.
This
SD Gundam is the action RPG for home consoles, for PlayStation consoles, Xbox, and Switch, and also PC. Bandai Namco announced this week that they had to release some new footage and trailers and whatnot for the game, and they announced that a demo was coming. It released on the Japanese and Southeast Asia digital stores for PlayStation and Nintendo. I don't know if they released one for Xbox, but it was only for consoles and none of the PC version. Nothing on Steam for this demo. It'll have save data transfer progress. It lets you play through a good chunk of the beginning of the game. There was some weird wires crossed because the new trailer was in English, but that was for Southeast Asia, and then so that's why the demo. They said the demo is going to come out on July 22nd, but that's only for Southeast Asian storefronts, and then for Western storefronts, the demo is going to come out on the 28th or 29th. So when Xenoblade releases and Digimon Survive, so I was like, well, I might as well give this a shot. I have a Japanese PSN, and the demo itself already has English options in it, like English language. It's just like a universal app that'll read the settings of your console and what the local language settings are. So it has full English support already. So I was like, let's give this a go. Let's see how it plays. I've been really interested in this game. And the game is it's pretty straightforward. It is like an action game, linear levels. You defeat a good chunk of enemies before a boss enemy. You have your standard controls of it's not quite like a Dynasty Warriors Musou game with a lot of on-screen enemies at once, maybe 5 or 6 at any given time. But the action itself is a lot more intimate. The grunt enemies are something you can't really ignore in the Dynasty Warriors game. So you have your standard melee button, a ranged attack, and 2 sub weapons with you. The interesting thing about this game is has sort of light action elements from Devil May Cry. It has a light launcher combo to launch enemies into the air, and then you can press the jump button to boost up to them and continue an air juggle combo on them. And also you have a skill bar that if it fills up, you can use your super attack on your playable character. Let's say you're using a gun tank, so that gun tank's super unique attack, but it's all meters all filled up. It's using its shoulder cannons to fire off 3 big shots at the enemy. Where this game is how it distinguishes itself from other action games is there's roles to characters in this game. So say the Gundam Barbados from Iron Blooded Orphans, that's a melee class character, as opposed to a all-rounder character maybe the Gundam, the original Gundam, and the gun tank would be a sharpshooter character. And when you're playing these characters with their assigned roles, that each of the three roles, whether you're like an all-rounder, an attacker, or sharpshooter, or like melee and a sharpshooter, like they have a class action skill that's like exclusive to their class. So like if you're playing like the sharpshooter gun tank character, like the sharpshooter class or role action that you can activate is like it'll reload all your weapons at once because everything has a cooldown, and that'll take some time to refill before you can do them again, like for the ranged attacks and your sub weapons. So if you use that sharpshooter action on gun tank, like it'll refill all of its weapons at once. Or if you're using an all-rounder character and use its roll action, it can like cancel its attack strings faster when you boost out of them. So you can do like 1, 2, and then boost, and then it'll be much quicker to get into another attack string.
So each
that
character
was
type is
activated.
assigned a specific class type. It's not like
Yeah.
you pick gun tank and then pick whether you're sharpshooter or all rounder.
Yeah, it's like when you pick gun
Okay.
tank, it's always a sharpshooter. That's what it is.
All
It's
right.
not.
Just to framework the game in my head for me, is this a
Yeah.
game where I've watched some gameplay footage while you were talking about it, and
Mhm.
I can kind of see how you mean that it's sort of Devil May Cry-ish, it's sort of Muso-ish, but like is it like a series of encounters that are linear that you just progress through in a straightforward fashion, or is it more
So the
like
game,
arcade based?
so it's not like arcade based. I mean, you definitely get like loot at the end of like stages. Like you'll get like parts that you get equipped to your characters, and when they level up, they can equip more parts. And obviously, like the difficulty level will get you more like better parts, like higher quality parts, because they have like certain uh like stat effects on them, and like if you get a higher rarity part, like it might have 2 of those effects or 3 of those effects on it. Also, as you're leveling up, you're also allocating stats to improve their melee, their boost meter, their attack, their melee attack, and their ranged attack. You can spend those points on them, and but like it's not really arcade-ish, and you do follow a story, but like the story isn't your standard. Hey, go through like the original Gundam story. Hey, get through Zeta Gundam's story. Hey, go through Gundam Wing story. It's a lot more interestingly interconnected. Like how the flow of the game works is at the very beginning, you're like going through the original Gundam's story scenario where normally Amuro would meet Ramba Ral for the first time. For some reason, Amuro hasn't deployed in the Gundam for that battle. So you're going through it with your own like original character, like a silent protagonist and like your squad of people. And then like in the middle of that battle, Ramba Ral does ambush like the white base ship in it, but like in like mid like when it's about to like go down on you, like get the jump on you from an ambush, like a break event happens where where Ramba Ral's goof is like replaced by the Gundam Barbados all of a sudden out of nowhere. So like one of the very first battles you fight is like the Gundam Barbados, and then you kind of you go into this mystery like why are these break events happening? Why is time so weird? What is like the chronology is like very way off, and so how this game is like presented to you is after that battle is over, you're like part of like entering like this like I don't know how to describe it. It's like a virtual world or simulation called the G universe. So like some like third party admin bails you out. So like your player assisted character or your player character and like a character named Yuno is like pulled out of like that simulation. You meet this character that you eventually come to call Sakura Slash, and then you basically have to like find out like from this like almost admin third party outsider perspective of like okay, what is going on? Okay, I'm gonna boot you into like since Gundam Barbados is from the Iron Blooded Orphans timeline, let's go investigate like that stage in that timeline of events. So like the very next stage from that original Gundam stage is like an Iron Blooded Orphans stage, and that stage occurs at the very end of season 1, where you have to go towards like a capital where a meeting is being held because that's how the events worked. And then so as you're approaching that city, Leos from the Gundam Wing universe are the break event there. And then you're kind of put into like this daisy chain of like, why is this why are these Gundam Wing enemies happening here? So after you complete that stage, you go to like a Gundam Wing stage to like find out like why the Epion showed up in the Iron Blooded Orphan stage previously. So and then eventually, once you go through enough of like these chain of stages, you'll eventually like find the source of the anomaly. You'll find Ramborel where which timeline he was in with his goof. You defeat him, then you go back to like the previous like the first stage where like the original Gundam was supposed to be at, and then in that's what they call true missions, where hey, Amuro's in his Gundam, he faces off with Ramborel, like how it's supposed to be, and then that's how you kind of like complete one of these like story scenario beats. And I assume that's going to be like that, that's how it's going to be in the game. It's like you're basically hopping in between Gundam timelines for each stage to find out why they're there.
So
And
do
it's
you
kind of
do you
it's kind of
think
a
that
weird
this game
experience.
do you think this game would be better suited for someone who is very aware of the stories, or maybe knows only half of them, or only loosely remembers what happens in Gundam Wing?
I mean, you don't like you don't have to like. I don't know if it's like great for a newcomer. Like it's like of course a certain aspect of it's like oh cool like cool these robots. Like I can make a lot of these robots and play them because like certain stages drop blueprints, and then when they drop blueprints, you get enough to like make a robot to be playable in there. Like I don't know if this is like a great like hey I want to get into Gundam, let's play this SD Gundam Battle Alliance game, but it's gonna be like fun for like people who like maybe watched or experienced like a certain amount of Gundam or maybe one or two things like oh I recognize this, that's cool that it's in there, and potentially like if they interface enough with like other Gundam series in there, or like if their characters interact with another Gundam character, that might like push them to like hey I want to go uh watch this or read this like Gundam thing because like the way that the game portrayed them like seemed really cool, and I want to get to know more about them. I feel like that's the sort of the allure of the game. I don't know if it's like a great like hey first time Gundam person here, I'm just here for a good time, because you're like okay I guess things are happening, I don't know.
Well, like I'm kind of in the place where I've seen 3 Gundam series, but then I
Uh-huh.
recognize Barbados just from like osmosis, but I've never watched Iron Blooded Orphans. So it
Mhm.
seems like it can be kind of fun for someone that like me that's more in the middle. That
Yeah.
like okay, like this would be a way to introduce me to the characters of Iron Blooded Orphans, and in kind of in a non-canon fashion, but still be like, oh okay, like that's who this is, and this is how they interact with the other people, like both in and without their specific series.
Yeah, it's just like a simple fun Gundam like game.
Hmm.
It feels like I've had a lot of fun with the demo. Its mechanics are a lot more. They're way more in depth than I thought, because like this game even has like the Guilty Gear like burst system where if an enemy is like putting you in a combo, you can spend some of your skill meter to like execute like a burst to like push them away, and also you can activate that burst when you're not getting hit and it hits the character. If it hits an enemy during that, you'll get like your guard meter is going to refill, your boost meter is going to refill. So like there's like so it kind of borrows elements from like the gold burst element in Guilty Gear as well. And then you can also use that a burst to like extend your combos. So it's very interesting of like hey like you can have like just a simple fun time in this, but there is like there's like enough in-depth mechanics to make like battles a lot more engaging. And because like on top of that you also have like just guard mechanics, just dodges, and count and perfectly timed counters against boss fights that'll put them in a state where you can like combo them if you guard it at the right time against the incoming attack. So I was like that's really that's very unusual and unexpected, but I welcome it, because
And this
I
game
love
is
those.
multiplayer, right?
Yeah, it supports up to 3 players in multiplayer, online multiplayer. The demo does have that functionality for people who want to play with their friends in these first few stages, and you can set parameters on like what kind of rooms you want and invite your friends in them. So it's been cool. Yeah, I really looking forward to the final game and seeing like just how many playable characters are there and how much content is in the game. Bandai Namco also announced the first set of DLC coming for SD Gundam Battle Alliance. That's part of the season pass. They're adding the Gundam Age FX and the Gundam Narrative C packs in it as playable characters in its first DLC drop, along with like a few new crossover missions in there. And they also and typical of them as well. They also announced like all like the super special editions, like the premium sound editions that has like music from like the anime series in them, like the opening and ending themes for several of the Gundam animes in that. Um, they're also including some of like the deep cuts from like previous Gundam games, like some of like the Gundam games on PSP. Some of their tracks are in there as well. But if you don't like, if you still want to replace the music with your own and not be confined to that, the game does allow for custom BGM from MP3 files that you have on console. I don't know for Switch, but I know it does allow that, like how the Super Robot Wars games did it on PlayStation, and I assume the Xbox version will have it as well, along with the PC version. So that's if you want to customize it your own way, the game allows for that. But yeah,
it seems
that's
kind of the soundtrack splicing or whatever you want to call it. It feels like kind of like a relic of olden times. Like I remember like old MMOs would allow you to do that, where you could change the backing tracks in certain areas with whatever custom MP3 that you just dropped into a folder. And I didn't know if it was like intended behavior or not. So it's kind of cool that they have something bespokely here just for console players of a modern game, just be able to put in whatever soundtrack they want.
I'm glad that they've embraced that, because that's kind of the frustrating thing. Is like for people who really like Gundam and really like the music of Gundam, like their openings, their endings, their like, and then like their original soundtracks, like there's a lot of great stuff. And like to see that, like if the premium sound doesn't offer that, or they just want to do it on their own, it opens it up for that, so you can like kind of relive moments that like that you're really fond of with accompanying music that you put in there.
And that will also release in late August, around the same time as Soul Hackers. So, as always, busy time of year for the next month and change. One thing that we did mention was releasing this week was the new DLC for Stranger of Paradise. Has anyone here touched that yet, or are we going to have to table that one?
It's not good.
Wait, what happened?
So I'm just gonna ask you, Josh. When you did you watch the trailer for the new DLC?
Yeah.
Just so everyone's clear, this is Stranger of Paradise. Is it Trial of the Iron King? Trial of the Dragon King. I think I'm getting confused with the Dark Souls expansion. Trials of the Dragon King, which is the first DLC that released a couple days ago.
Okay, so Josh, having seen the trailer for the DLC, what would you say you expected from the DLC?
I expect some cool fights with Bahamut, some really cool new classes to tinker with, and I guess there's gonna be like more better loot in it. So I assume, because they're adding Bahamut difficulty, so I assume they'll have like a lot of cool like new loot to like experiment with.
Okay, so you are right about 2 or 3. Well, you're right mostly, but what if I told you that in order to get access to the Bahamut fight and the Warrior of Light fight, you basically had to grind like existing levels on Bahamut difficulty from the get-go, and they are balanced around you having limit break your jobs in Chaos difficulty ever since the game came out.
Also, you have to like grind up to like get like be able to like even access them.
Well, no. So the first mission you unlock upon getting the DLC is a kind of mock battle against the Warrior of Light, where it's set to like item level like 200 or something like that.
Sure.
You can do it from the get-go, even if you haven't touched Chaos mode. And the trick is that you can't die, and it'll give you like a group of like item level 200 equipment as soon as you finish it, which is on paper enough for you to start challenging Bahamut difficulty missions because they start at item level 200. The problem is that they're balanced around not just the item level, but also very clearly the level for your jobs. And by default, your jobs max out at level 30, but you can limit break them up to level 99 if you do specific
I remember that.
Chaos difficulty modes. And I'm just going to come out and say it. I spent like 2 hours last night with a group of people, like 2 other people on Xbox Live, trying to do the first mission in the game on Bahamut difficulty at item level 200. All of us were item level 250. We kept getting one shot by the first boss in the first level.
I just want to make sure I understand something correctly. Like you have to. So I kind of understand and appreciate that this is like an unfairly hard, a maddening level difficulty for the game, but you have to do it in order to play the new content.
Yes.
Okay, so that's where it's different from like Neo, where when Neo added DLC, you could still play it on Way of the Samurai. And yeah, those
no.
DLCs would add higher tiers, which you could then get to, but you could still access the stuff without going to New Game plus or whatever.
Yeah, and for like the majority of the DLC, you're not even playing new content. You're just playing the new difficulty to get dragon treasures, which then lets you talk to Bahamut, and eventually you'll get access to his fight, and then eventually the Warrior of Light fight. Besides those two fights, there is no new content besides the difficulty, which is a modifier.
Weren't there like 4 new main missions and 9 new side missions or things like that?
No.
What?
I thought they
Well, no. You do get specific Bahamut difficulty side missions, but they're not like story missions. It's just, I think the 4 story missions they're also counting the fake out first fight with Warrior of Light, which doesn't really even fucking count because you can't die and it's just basically scripted.
Okay.
So you're saying basically like the new content where they list like 4 new missions, 9 new side missions, 3 new bosses. The vast majority of it is locked behind Bahamut level difficulty.
Yes.
Okay, so yeah, that is not what I was expecting. I thought it was like, here's some new missions. Also, you can now access New Game plus or whatever.
Yeah.
I think they should have been more transparent about like, hey, this is like for like super endgame stuff. Like I assume that wouldn't have gone well though in marketing, but
I'll just be honest.
Oh.
This DLC should have been a title update.
That's a shame. It seems really cool. Yeah.
Yeah, because it's like, yes, I understand it's new content they had to develop, but I feel like the way this is going like over with pretty much everyone I know that's tried the DLC, this being attached to the season pass is more toxic than if they had just like removed it from the season pass and made it a free update.
Now, no one got early access to this really. So, like, there's no review. Like, this is fresh, hot out of the oven. No one got preview access to know how this expansion or DLC was formatted or anything.
I don't know if Scott is planning on like playing through this DLC. I'll have to talk with him, but it's like if he's not, I guess I'll keep going at it and try to finish all the actual content and write something up. But it's like right now, it's like I can't recommend this unless you're somebody that really, really like loved going through chaos mode in the base game and we're all about like just boosting your character's power up a bunch.
All I did by the end was like I did like a chaos level like solo like that ended pretty fast, so I can get a lot of like anima shards or crystals or for whatever for like leveling up classes fast and getting them all to their initial level 30 cap. But that was like the last thing I remember doing in it. Like I didn't really go through like all the chaos levels to level them up and then like uncap the rest of the classes, because I really didn't like the chaos difficulty system of like leveling up each and individual stages to like get better stuff out of them.
And
it's really, really grindy.
As James has been describing this, I've been trying to see if there's any like formal reviews of this, and mostly are all when I try to search around, it's just basically people on the Reddit coming to the same realization James has previously and us has now. Like the new DLC is only available with Chaos and Bahamut difficulty, and someone's like, the developer's decision to lock the Trial of the Dragon King DLC behind a new, even harder difficulty that they invented specifically for this DLC, where everything pretty much one-shot you, like, is frustrating. And like, oh, like that's, I don't know. That's not how I would have envisioned, as someone who hasn't played this yet but wants to get around to it. Like, I just kind of assumed like, oh, they're going to add a few chapters. Oh, and then they're also for people who really love the game and want to give themselves a challenge. They're also adding a difficulty mode. I would have expected it in parallel, not in sequence, not master Bahamut mode before you get to access the new content.
I wonder if they're going to release a patch to like address like, because it seems like the talk around this DLC so far seems to be largely negative. I don't think anyone has really said, yeah, this is great, to people who actually played it. Like, I wonder if they're gonna like change something up soon.
Yeah, I do know some people where even like some of my friends that are enjoying the DLC are being very specific when they talk about it, and they're like, "Yeah, I loved this DLC, but most people are going to fucking hate it."
Mhm. Yeah, that's a bummer. That it sounded really cool, but man, that is a very bad implementation of it. It seems like.
Well, like I played that pretty much around the same time Adam did, and we had kind of different ways that we approached it. So when I played Neo 2, I kind of just played it through on the standard difficulty, but still played through all the DLC. But then Adam kind of had a little bit more time on his hands and was able to tier up through the different difficulty levels and kind of showed me. I think I topped out at Divine Gear and he went to the next tier up, and we were both able to enjoy the new DLC. But I played it on the standard difficulty, and he kind of had grounded a little more and got his build, like his whatever the equivalent of his item level is, higher, and also played the new DLC, and we could both enjoy it. But now it feels like if that had been formatted the same as this way, I would have been kind of boxed out until it's like, you want to play this stuff, you got to put in the time to grind up through divine difficulty, or in this case Bahamut difficulty. It just seems like it kind of has an expectation for players of the base game who might have set the game down in March, because that's when it came out, and then wanted to come back to it. Like, nope, you can't, not unless you ground whatever these your item level up to 200 or 250.
Yeah, and it's like one of the things I do think is worth mentioning is that even the people that like got the platinum trophy, there's no guarantee that they would have been ready for this, because like one of the trophies slash achievements for the game, I think they've patched it by now, but at launch there was a trophy for clearing every main story mission on chaos difficulty. It was bugged where if you finished even one level on chaos difficulty, you got the trophy for doing all of them.
Nice.
So the people that were just in it for the platinum trophy, they probably didn't do every mission on chaos difficulty. They probably didn't go through that whole process. So even the people that were like achievement hunters and you would think would be more likely to be receptive to this type of DLC, they probably were ill prepared too.
Do you know how you get the new jobs in this DLC?
I have no clue, because I've spent like 6 hours and all I have had to show for it is one mission that took me like 3 or 4 to clear with a group of people.
All right, I did you new prog live streams for Stranger Paradise DLC.
Yeah, it's like people unironically on Twitter saying, and well, actually, this is the thing that gets me. Remember how before launch they said that they wanted there to be like post game content that required you to work in like a group, kind of like raid? This is that content. It wasn't in the base game. They just put it as the first DLC because it wasn't ready for launch. And like playing through it makes sense. This is exactly what they were talking about.
If this was like if this content was like in the game, like launch game, like I think I would have tried to like work up to it, because like that was the thing that really hung me up at the post game of the launch state of the game is like, I could get through chaos difficulty and like grind up these levels for the stages and like max out, like, try to max out my jobs, but like like to what end? And like if I had like this sort of content, maybe hopefully with better implementation, I probably would have been motivated enough to work up to it. But now it's just like, this seems like a little too late for like what you're demanding me to do now, because now that like new games are coming out as well, it's, I don't know if I'll get around to it anytime soon. Maybe I'll just wait till everything, all the other content is out, and think about getting back to it.
It just feels like the sensible thing to do would have been to, whatever the newest boss is of the DLC, have some sort of trophy or even an in-game reward, some sort of weapon or something. I haven't played the game. That rewards you for beating the newest geek part on Bahamut difficulty, but not lock it behind that. Just make that a goal that people who love the game and have lived it since March to strive to. I don't know. Yeah, interesting decision. It'll be interesting to see how they respond to it.
Yeah, I'm looking at the Stranger Paradise subreddit, and there's just this one like thread saying DLC is too hard, and like literally everyone's just agreeing. It's like, Jesus Christ.
Yeah, I wasn't expecting that.
I have to wonder how internal playtests of this went, and like what was like the feedback loop that they got from internal playtests. It's just one of those weird things of like, I don't know, like it's like, oh, we're decked out in like max gear, so we're gonna balance it around this. It's like what?
Yeah, I'm just looking through that subreddit now, and pretty much everyone's agreeing. Yeah, this like even people that are like, I'm enjoying this. It's like this shouldn't have been how the DLC was like made.
This was quite a curveball. I wasn't expecting this. I thought we were trying to talk about it, flash by it, but nope.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like I wasn't sure if I wanted to talk about, which is why I didn't put it on the sheet until like basically
Just
5
now.
minutes before I started.
Yeah.
talking
I
about
mean,
it.
yeah. It's
Then
good
I
that you brought it
realized
up.
It's like I feel like this kind of deserves a PSA for our audience that maybe didn't get swindled into purchasing it yet.
Yeah,
I
I
didn't
still
get
want
it.
to. I still want to play.
but it's like man. To be more positive about the game, I'm not sure if it's just the most recent update or if it's been like over the last couple of months, but technically the game is in a much better spot now. The resolution's improved, the frame rate is improved. There's still dips here and there, but it's nowhere near as bad as it was at launch. So if someone wanted to pick up the game, and I believe it's still on sale now on PSN and Xbox, maybe Epic. I don't know about Epic. The game's good. I enjoyed it quite a bit. It's one of my favorite games this year. Don't pick up the DLC, but if you're interested in playing the base game, I can definitely say now is the best time to. It's just such a damn shame about that.
I
first
forgot
DLC.
this was I forgot this was Epic exclusive on PC. Well, I think with that unexpected addendum out of the way, I think that we have covered what we wanted to talk about for games we've been playing this week. Obviously, next week we'll be able to pick Adam and Josh's brains on their impressions of Xenoblade 3. Obviously, we've already talked about those in a preview context, but in a review context. And then whoever of us here gets started, as it will release like a day before we record our next podcast. So we'll have that coming for next week, and maybe we'll have a chance to talk about Digimon if Josh squeezes it in or someone else steps onto the podcast to talk about it. We'll have to play it by ear. In terms of the news front, this week has actually been a little bit lighter. Before we go into the news itself, we already talked about all the features up on RPG site regarding Live Alive, including Paige's review, and then Paige, Chow, and Alex have worked together, putting up a big guide hub together for that game. It's all up on the site, and it's all interlinked together from the different scenarios, and it's really quite a lot of work into that. And I've been having that up on a second monitor as I've been playing through the game. But I don't want this to fall through the cracks. We also did get a feature on the site from James for Monster Hunter Rise, just talking about specifically the Sunbreak expansion, talking about some of his impressions about the endgame specifically that he would not or could not put into the actual review. Was this actually like an embargo limitation that kind of suggested that you fork this out into its own thing?
Yes, honestly, in retrospect, our reviews just talked about it anyways, and I doubt it would have been a problem if I just put my thoughts in the review.
No, I mean, I respected like, hey, we're abiding by the guidelines and embargo that we were given. That like, we shouldn't be trying to like, oh, since other reviews did it, it should be it's okay if we do it. It's like, no, it's just
you're right. It's just I'm saying like, we probably would have been fine in retrospect.
So the context here is we've already kind of discussed this, I think, with a pretty good detail on this podcast, and that is about Monster Hunter Rise Sunbreak's afflicted monsters at the end game. And this is essentially putting into written form James's impressions of that mechanic, comparing it to other Monster Hunter games, up onto the site as its own standalone, basically opinion piece. So James, I think you've had a few opportunities on the podcast before to talk about it. I don't know if you want to just punctuate it here in any way, or just kind of let the article speak for itself.
The article can speak for itself, and if you're a regular podcast listener, you've already heard me talk about that system.
Yeah, the only new development out of this is like
less than a day.
Yeah, less than a day. Less than a day after you put that feature up, Capcom announced that you can use the afflicted monster materials to further upgrade, I think, armor. So like giving them like another purpose as well. So it's just kind of your timing, but it doesn't
fix my issues, but it does make it better, because like one of my main like takeaways in the article, which I will kind of say, is that the afflicted monster system doesn't make as much sense when there's like rank 10 weapons that you can just make that don't require you to engage with the system. Like the Furious Regime weapons are some of the best in the game. The Malzena weapons are some of the best in the game. Yeah, you need to grind out your master rank to get the materials to craft those, but you don't have to engage with the afflicted monsters at all. And even like the rank 9 Malzena weapons are perfectly capable until you get to that point. So it's like, it doesn't feel like, at least right now, before that new patch comes out, it didn't feel like there was a good enough reason to engage with the afflicted monsters.
Yeah. But, it's future content updates, like kind of like the using them to upgrade armor. I'm sure Capcom is thinking about and getting feedback on like what are better ways we can do this to like make the system, a more engaging, enjoyable like end game content till the title updates come out. So
I kind of already mentioned this in passing when I talked about games I've been playing, but yeah, I fought my first afflicted monster, and then I could kind of see what the treadmill looked like, and I didn't step away because like I didn't think I would enjoy that. It's just that I kind of already did it all in Monster Hunter World. Maybe I'll wait for the title updates to come through to see if something interesting comes out. I'm like, all right, I kind of get a feeling for what this is. I can let it lie for now.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that article up on the site is called, sorry, I just don't think I ever actually titled it, Monster Hunter Rise Sunbreak's Endgame Stumbles at the Finish Line.
I can see what they were going for with it. I can understand the thought process to get there. I just think the execution didn't land as well. But like I remember I mentioned this to James, and I was like, as I did more of these like afflicted monsters solo, but like I sort of had this like moment because I did so many of them solo, like first I did such long like play sessions pre-release. I was like, I think I Stockholm syndrome myself into like liking them almost, and I don't know how or why. It's hard to, I can't even put into words why at this point. I was like, so I don't know.
All right, we don't have a lot of headline news this week, but this one is kind of, there's not a lot to talk about here, but it's interesting and exciting. And that is that we inadvertently got our first look at the technically formally announced, I think that's the best way to put it, Yakuza 8, or if you're using the English language, releases the sequel to Yakuza Like a Dragon. If you've been following our site and our podcast, we did talk a lot last year about some of the restructuring over at RGG Studios at Sega, about how Nagoshi had stepped down from his role as studio head and being replaced by Yokoyama. Let me see. Yeah, Masayoshi Yokoyama. And during the time when they talked about their studio restructuring, they did mention in clear language that they were working on a follow-up to Yakuza Like a Dragon. Well, in the last week, a Japanese MMA fighter / YouTuber named Mikuru Asakura was able to tour RGG Studios, and kind of as part of his YouTube upload, we got basically some behind the scenes footage for the upcoming sequel to Yakuza Like a Dragon. The only things that are really of interest here is that we can kind of see some recurring characters. We see Nanba is back. We see Adachi is back. We see that we have a new hairstyle where he has his.
Where's the Afro? No. Oh,
Yeah,
I don't know. I don't know how I feel about this.
So Ichiban has his hair like either combed down or pulled back or things like that. It's kind of interesting to see. Like I'm poking through the YouTube footage now because I'm trying to remember. Like if I remember right, Namba and Adachi are still wearing their same clothes, which is like a police bomber vest and a hobo outfit, which is kind of fun.
Yeah.
Yeah, but the afro's gone.
Yeah, the afro's gone though. So
he has
Ichiban has a new
back.
look.
Yeah, it's like you barely see it like that. At some point, like some of the footage, like he has actually his hair tied back. So it's just like, I don't know, man. I associate I really, really like Ichiban's like Afro style of Like a Dragon. It was one of those things like, yeah, now this is a character design.
Oh, and then the reason why Asakura was visiting the studio is because his likeness is going to be into the game, and some like you see him in the motion capture setup and getting all that, because that's something that RGG Studios has done for several of their Yakuza titles. So he'll be incorporated into the game in some fashion. We don't know the specifics of that, but kind of cool to see that yes, Yakuza 8 is being worked on. We don't have any other footage or formal announcement or press release. Just kind of an interesting behind the scenes. I kind of appreciate that, where this is almost like how movie studios say like, yeah, this is a project we're currently working on.
Yeah.
It's they don't have to be like they decided at some point with the studio change up back last October, say like, yes, we're working on this. No, we don't have like a footage for you or a vertical slice or anything, and it's still a work in progress. And in this way, this isn't really an announcement of any sort, but like, yeah, you can kind of see they're still hard at work.
So I have several questions. One, do you think Asakura like knew that was like not supposed to be shared, or like this like off-screen footage of the new Yakuza, and it was like kind of like the studio didn't want to be disrespectful because Asakura is like very well respected, like a big MMA fighter. Like there's like just kind of let it slide. Like, how do you think this went down? Like, do you think they're like, do you think RGG Studios like
Knew that this was happening?
Yeah.
For some reason, I have the feeling that they did, and they're playing it fast and loose. Like they're not being uptight about it. They're like, yeah, sure. So Asakura has 2.5 million subscribers on YouTube. This footage, it's a little 15-minute video of his little tour of Sega Sammy and RGG, has 1.5 million views. So this is like a big megaphone for them, it seems like. So I think
it's very nonchalant too. Like it wasn't like Asakura did it like later, like upload like a separate video with just the new Yakuza game footage itself. It's like it's still just in that nonchalant studio tour.
The premise of the footage is Asakura's tour, and then in the background, and then like him getting the motion capture and all that of his likeness, and then it's just while Yakuza 8 is being developed, so you pick up some of the in-work progress being done in the background. So it's not an RGG Studios megaphone, it's Asakura's, which is kind of interesting and fun, and I think it's unique, and I kind of like it. And I'm glad that RGG Studios seemingly hasn't had any issue with it. They're just on board with it, and they're being, like you said, nonchalant about it.
We should have held like a Twitter poll asking if people were okay with the Afro being gone. You want Afro Ichiban or Afro-less Ichiban? Should have been like the.
What about the Namba here?
Yeah, shout out to the one dude in our comments who was like, I loved Like a Dragon. I'm upset that Namba is returning. And then somebody replied to that just saying, I will gut you like a fish. And it went viral on Twitter.
Oh, man.
Namba's great. The whole cast is great.
Yeah.
Yakuza 7's great. If you haven't played Like a Dragon, you should play it. It's really good.
Do you think the Afro will return in some way, shape, or form?
I could see them being like, okay, that's the dumbest thing popped in my head. Remember, have you played DMC, Devil May Cry?
Yes.
And there's the one scene where the mop falls on his head. I'm guessing they'll do something like that, where like he'll have one scene where his hair tie like is pulled out for a moment, or like he's like in a wind tunnel and like the hair will go Afro for just a moment and then he'll tie it back immediately. I'm guessing there'll be some sort of like cheeky callback.
That'd be cheeky. That'd be funny. That's a very creative of you.
Yeah, no, obviously no announcement here of release window, release date, premise, anything like that, but they're working on it.
Will it be this year or will it be early next year?
Not if it was this year.
No way is this year. Yeah, there's no way this is this year. That'd be crazy. But man, our guy Ichiban, he's looking cleaned up though. He looks like he's ready to be a part of society. That's crazy.
Recently on the podcast, I think it was one of the weeks that I was gone, from one of the Nintendo Direct announcements, I believe it was we got the release date for the upcoming Dragon Quest Treasures, which is releasing this year in December. Do I have that right, Adam? When was the release date? When was the release date for Dragon Quest Treasures announced? I know it was announced in late June.
Was it Nintendo Direct? Yeah.
It was a Nintendo Direct. Okay,
we just got basically details on like, here are the characters, here are some of the monsters, and here's what you do.
Yeah, so I've been poking through this press release, but as you look through this, was there anything here that you saw that you really thought was specifically worth highlighting for this press release information about the upcoming Dragon Quest Treasures?
The only thing, it's mostly just like gameplay details. The one thing that I kind of assumed but didn't know for sure until now is they did change the English voice actors. I figured Eric's voice would be changed. You don't oftentimes get men voicing like young boys, sometimes, but usually you get women to voice those roles. Mia, I wasn't sure about, being female, but they actually changed both the voice actors for both Eric and Mia in English. I mean, I don't know about Japanese, but in English, they're actually being voiced by like child actors, like 11, 12-year-olds. So that's always, that'll be interesting. Hopefully they're given good direction. I don't think we've heard it sound like yet.
Yeah, we don't have any footage of the English.
We have a
Go
name for
ahead.
the spirit guide animals with them. We have with Eric's spirit guide being Persula and Mia's spirit guide being Porcus. So those are fun names. I
Yeah,
like
one's
it.
a cat and one's a pig. So
The
that
pig
works.
looks like a piggy bank.
So remind me,
Go.
this was originally announced as a Dragon Quest Monsters title. Is that correct? Was it
Uh,
Monsters or something
I don't
else?
know. It was not really formally announced. Just like years ago, I think it was like just not that long after Dragon Quest XI release, like late 2018 or early 2019. Um, they just showed like a concept art of Eric and Mia, and saying that they were working on a new Dragon Quest.
Oh, I found
Monsters
it.
game.
I found it.
Yeah.
2018 from Adam in November 6, 2018. New Dragon Quest
Yeah.
Monsters in development. So yeah, it was.
Yeah, so
and
it
that's
wasn't
back
really
when,
announced. It was more like teased, but then it kind of went silent for years, and wondering like what happened to it, and then it basically reemerged or at that Dragon Quest 35th event last year as this. So
Yeah.
it seems to have like some similarities to a Monsters game, but kind of its own thing.
Well, yeah, like in this press release, they talk about how you basically go to numerous islands and you can interact with the different monsters there using the dragon daggers. So basically, I was just wondering, like, is this how normal Dragon Quest Monsters games work, or is this something that's kind of unique to this one? Because they decided not to put this in the existing sub-series, but call it its own separate spin-off. Has anyone here played a Dragon Quest Monsters game? I haven't.
I have several of them. I don't know like what systems they were on because like I just kind of like pick up Dragon Quest Monsters games and like play them. Like if I think what was the one with Joker in the title? I
Dragon
remember there
Quest
was a
Monsters Joker.
There's a couple. I haven't played any.
yeah. They're fun. They're fun little games. I enjoyed them.
Yeah, but the monster, for people who haven't played any of those spin-offs, the information from the screenshots here basically show that is a key component of this. It shows Mia being carried by a bat, Eric standing on an ogre, using your monster special skills to search for treasure and fight side by side with a team of monsters. And it shows the battle system where Eric's fighting alongside some slimes and things like that. So very much getting that kind of monster raising aspect here in some respect. So this will be this is December 9th as the Nintendo Direct announced. So won't be in the cutoff for games this year. It'll be for next year, at least for our site's coverage. But I like Dragon Quest XI, and I think this game looks really kind of fun and cute and different. So making sure it's still on my radar. And we got Adam put up all the information and new screenshots up on the site. So details for Dragon Quest Treasures. You can go ahead and poke through that at your leisure. It looks really cute and charming. I don't know if we'll get a lot of interesting discussion out of this. We also did get 2 trailers in the upcoming in the last week. I guess 3 trailers. We did get the final trailer for Live Alive as well, but we kind of already discussed the games out, so might as well discuss the game itself. We did get a very long overview trailer for upcoming Xenoblade Chronicles 3. This thing is kind of it's a very long 8-minute trailer that kind of has a lot of the information from the Nintendo Direct that was specifically focused on this game, kind of spliced into trailer format. Obviously, you guys have already had the chance to discuss the game with your preview opportunity, and we're going to be discussing the game as a released entity next week. So I don't know if there's a whole lot to pull out of this overview trailer, but I guess if you haven't played a Xenoblade game, it might be a good thing to poke through. I don't know if any of you have poked through this. Those of you who have played the preview version of the game can look through the trailer to know how spoilery it might be. Whenever a trailer gets to like 8 minutes long, I start being like, how careful are they?
Most of the stuff shared for this game has been fairly early in the game.
It's mostly. I didn't watch the full trailer. Like I just kind of clicked through it, but it seems like it was mostly what was in the like the previews and the Nintendo Direct, right?
Yeah, like the only cool thing about it for us who already went through a lot of it is like Noah's English voice actor narrates it, and the way he pronounces some stuff is funny in it, and that got me to smile a little bit. But because I've heard him a lot already playing through the game, so. Yeah, I mean, it's just like a refresher. Like, hey, if you really haven't really been paying attention to this game and like curious to see what it is, it's a very even though 8 minutes is a lot, it's a very condensed format of like the content in the game. It's big. It has a lot of systems going on. It's different from past titles, and just a lot of cool stuff going on in that trailer.
And we also got a gameplay trailer for the upcoming Trails from Zero, Legend of Heroes, the Crossbell, the first of the 2 Crossbell games, which is releasing officially in English for the first time in September. So
I
this
think
gameplay,
everyone in this podcast have already played this.
well, not Adam.
Oh, really?
Nope. Right.
No. I don't
But
think I
but
was-
the gameplay, he's played Trails in the Sky whole trilogy. There's a couple kind of differences with the way the quartz works. It's more like the Cold Steel games. But yeah, if you've played any Trails game, or I won't say any Trails game, if you've played any Trails in the Sky trilogy game, the gameplay trailer here should look really familiar. And even if you're working backwards and you've played like Cold Steel and you're interested in this, to play it in that order, you'll still see kind of like where a lot of those ideas came from. So I don't think anything is really too surprising here.
it feels nice seeing like the kind of the old HUD for the Trails games again. It was like, oh yeah, that's what it used to look like.
Game is not, it has Japanese audio and English localization for the menu and stuff. So all the battle yells there's no voice acting, but all the battle yells are in Japanese. And I guess
there was voice acting they added from other versions. Japanese
Oh,
voice acting.
yeah. I guess I need to look at PH3s because PH3 had that. We talked about this on the podcast. Like I think the week before I took my break, how they have to how they're incorporating aspects from the fan translation release, from the Kai release, from the original release, from the PC release, the Joyoland ones. And I don't quite remember exactly what they're all pulling in from all the different things. But it doesn't have English voice acting in any respect.
Yeah, I think these releases, the cross-bell official localizations, like they're only gonna have Japanese voices for them, not English, from what I understand.
Right.
Yeah.
Probably don't want to redub the game. Trying to
mean,
release window even longer, probably.
Yeah, it'll push back them back even further, and I can't imagine like their sales expectations are like high for these releases.
So
It must be a tough market for it.
I'm just gonna say, when do you think Kuro is gonna come out in the West?
2024.
Yeah, because
Yeah,
So
2024 at the earliest.
because
Like
2022 is
Hajimari
0,
2023, yeah.
and then early 2023 is Azure, and then late 2023 is Reverie. So yeah, it's 2024.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
question is, would it be early 2024 or would it be late 2024? That's the thing. And I'm pretty sure Kuro 2 won't be until 2025. It's fucked up.
Yeah, we've beaten this horse. So moving on.
You asked.
I'll ask.
I did.
Oh yeah, that's right. Good job, Chow.
I had to know.
All the remaining news on the podcast this week is just some release date changes. Nothing major here, just a couple little things. We have an indie game. The Tarnishing of Juxtia is launching on July 26th. This is a Souls-like that I always look at the name of it, and I'm wondering if they came up with the name The Tarnishing before or after that became kind of a key component of Elden Ring. But I assume it's just coincidental. So this is a game releasing on Steam next week. Maybe slot it for later because next week's a busy week already, but that game will be out if you're interested in that on PC. Another kind of Souls-like game, Thymesia, is being delayed again just slightly. It was originally going to be late last year, then it got pushed back to this year. It's being pushed back slightly again to August 18th. Still a busy time of year, so kind of two Soulsy-like indie games that are releasing in late July and mid-August. A game that was just announced, I believe, earlier this year. This is Circus Electrique. Adam originally covered this game when it was announced, and Josh just covered this new release date announcement just this week. It'll be releasing in early September. This is from a pinball studio. What is this?
Zen Studios, the makers of the Zen pinball games. So yeah, it's kind of but they also made what was the name of the game? Operancy of the Sun or something like that.
Oh, they did do that? I recognize that game. Wasn't that a dungeon crawler?
Yeah, Adam, you played through that, right?
Yeah, the Operantia was pretty good.
Yeah.
It's a dungeon crawler, right? Like kind of a Action Odyssey-esque?
Yep, first person and all that.
Yeah, so this Circus Electrique kind of has an interesting kind of like steampunky marionette vibe again. Only I don't really know what sort of game this is. It's Victorian era, so it's like a lot of like mannequins and things like that. Almost kind of like Five Guys at Freddy's like.
The battle UI very much reminds you of like Darkest Dungeon, of like your row of characters facing the other row of enemies. and like how you interact with them. You can like before you attack, you can see like your accuracy, like the damage range, and like quick
Oh,
chance.
I was feeling kind of self-conscious that I described that so poorly, but then I'm looking at the way you described it. This game contains 15 playable circus-themed archetypes with a steampunk touch in their Victorian era attire. So it's like that is a small needle to thread exactly what sort of vibe this is going for. If you're interested in what the hell Circus Electrique looks like, Josh put the announced date trailer up on the site. It'll be releasing in September. Very unique and interesting looking game. I have no idea what our plates will look like in September, but it's coming out on everything. So we'll maybe have a chance to revisit it then. And here's the game that I think a lot of us here are familiar with. I think everyone on this podcast has played this one. Ys 8 Lacrimosa of Dana will be releasing on PlayStation 5 in November. So November 15th and November 18th.
Yeah,
It's still kind of wild this is getting a PS5 version, because isn't the PS4 version already 4K 60 on PS5 because of like the PS4 Pro patch or something?
Yeah, like the only thing that's different with this one, and the only is like it's all the DLC is bundled with it, and that's it. And Nice America is not shared, and it probably won't be the case. Like I don't think people can like upgrade to it, or like there'll be no free upgrade.
They confirm there's no upgrade.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Okay. Then there you go. And I guess like I don't know what you'd even like do. You just get it, and it's like whatever DLC you have, or whatever DLC you'd get if there was an upgrade. Like you're really not getting much if you already played this game.
I think the one thing
is,
yeah, I think the one thing is that there are some like graphical updates like to the shadows and whatnot, because it's based off the PC version. But it's like, is it going to have an unlocked frame rate mode? Is it going to be up to 120 FPS? Because I mean, the PS5 supports that. I mean, it would be nice.
Oh yeah,
it would be a selling point.
It does have VRR now too, right?
What about that co-op thing that I heard about for the PC version?
That was something that Durante did. They could technically do it on like console if they wanted to, but the thing is that wouldn't really be a good selling point, because even like the co-op thing for Ys 8 and Ys 9 is very clearly something that's hacked together, and if you're using it, you kind of go in with that like understanding that it's not.
It's kind of got this like homebrew like vibe around it.
Yeah, it's more of like a feature in its experimental phases, more so than like, oh, this is finalized and optimized.
It's really cool, but it's definitely something where even Durante himself says, yeah, this is not meant to be like a super, super serious feature. It's just something that literally he came up with because he could, and he was like, hey, can I release this? And they were like, yeah, sure.
Tap.
It is kind of fun. So on our website, on the sidebar of any article, we list the consoles that any game appears on. And I just like over the years, we've seen Ys 8 like this list just grow. It's got Vita, PS4, PC, Switch, mobile, Stadia, and now PS5. Stadia,
Yeah.
Remember Stadia?
Yeah, I mean, Ys 8 is one of those games that like has had like a very storied history. Even though it's like a recent release in video games, because of just like on top of like just all the port announcements and re-releases it's gotten, like it also had like the whole like initial localization debacle, and they had to hire someone or a studio or another firm or whatever to like
hey Josh,
and then that didn't pan out, so they went to Durante's team and just,
I feel so old right now, because I was thinking about it's like that whole localization debacle is nearly 5 years old now.
Yeah.
I'm going through all of our news posts that include Ys 8 attached to it, and there's so many. We talked about Ys 8, and not we, and it's been whoever was here back then. Ys 8 was featured in Tetracast episode 26 in February 2016.
Oh my god. Yeah, now I feel old.
It was also apparently talked about in 27, 28, and 29. Apparently they talked about it a lot back in the day.
Back in the day, there was no JRPGs, apparently.
I mean,
Ys 8 was the only JRPG.
I mean, Ys 8 is still Falcom's best game. Prove me wrong, but
it is one of their best games for sure.
But the best? That's subjective, guys.
I don't know. I don't know if it's the best, but it is one of their best.
It is one of their best.
And just to leave a little tease for those that haven't played like the Japanese version or the fans translation, I would say that Trails from Zero is, if not the best, one of Falcom's best. So circle that on your calendar if you haven't played it yet.
Really good, solid game.
Yeah, I saw that like info about like wishlisted stuff on Steam, and it's like Trails from Zero is not going to sell well on PC, isn't it? I hope it does well. I really hope so, but
I
don't know.
feel it's gonna get the live alive treatment, guys. It's like it's definitely good for its time, but I'm not sure if it could entice the Western audience.
I
yeah,
think it's
you know,
I think on
Chow.
PC, I think on PC it's less that and more. Most of the people on PC that wanted to play it have probably already played it through the DL site version with the GeoFront translation.
You know, Chow, the thing about Trails of Zero is that so many games have been inspired from like aspects of it, but you know, Trails of Zero was an experimental game of its time.
I mean, it was a good Trails game for sure.
No,
With the 8
it is
scenarios,
really good, and I'll give more fuller thoughts. Who's going to be covering the official release for us?
Scott.
Anyone?
Scott, yeah.
Oh, Scott. Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, because like both Chow and I recused ourselves, and yeah,
I'm interested in playing the official release, but I literally am less than like a.
I'm actually
just
most
over a year.
interested in Nayuta. I want to review Nayuta. Give me something
Adam
that's
being a
not,
hipster as always.
there we
Give me
go.
something
Yeah,
that's
I still need to play my
tied.
copy of Nayuta that I bought on Steam.
Give me something that's not tied to, you know, a 15 game series, like directly.
It might be.
Yeah, we don't know yet. That's the thing.
That person in the cover could be one of the characters' grandpa, you know?
Adam's like, please don't.
Don't know yet. We just wait for further games of the series to confirm that.
Maybe we'll find out in Kuro 2. It looks like a lot of shit's gonna happen in Kuro 2. It's like who knows?
Adam's gonna be so pissed if the Yuta ever like ties back into like the main real canon.
Why
Adam's
would Adam care? Adam, you've played all of the localized titles. You're not that far behind.
Has he played 4 yet? I don't think he has.
Heard that.
What?
I just think being shackled to canon makes the games worse in ways.
There you go.
It depends on how good the canon is, I suppose. I still have Cold Steel 4 installed on my Steam account, just like mocking me, like play
Well,
me
you
before.
don't need Cold Steel 4. We saw these references in earlier Cold Steel games.
I'm sorry, you need Cold Steel.
Once Reverie has a release date, I guess it has only a release year right now. Once it has like a release date, I'll be like, all right, Cold Steel.
For Reverie to make
play
any
that.
sense, you need Cold Steel 4. I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's like I've seen people say, "Oh well." It's this one argument I keep having with people where it's like, why are they doing Crossbell first? I want to get Reverie. And it's like, you want it, but you don't. You want to play Zero and Azure first because if anything, it's more of a follow-up to those games' plot than Cold Steel 1 through 4. Don't get me wrong, it still follows up on Reen stuff and finishes it, but for once when Falcom said, oh no, Reverie is a game about 3 different protagonists, and it's very specifically a game for all 3 of them, they weren't lying.
Okay. Before we wrap this up, I forgot to mention this, but it is pretty big news for fans of it. Square Enix did announce yesterday that they are finally officially giving it an English release to Grimoire Nier in the West next April. It is based on the revised edition that has info from the re-release of the Nier Replicant version 1.22, whatever. But this is going to be the
1.5. Just say that.
Well, yeah. But this is going to be the first time that Grimoire Nier is finally coming and like getting an official like English release, and that's awesome because Grimoire Nier has a lot of like valuable info for that universe and that series of games in it.
It's still wild to me that, especially with the Replicant remaster selling really well, here's just straight up one of Square Enix's bigger franchises these days.
Yeah, I know. It's so weird, so bizarre, and I'd like it to kind of like emphasize like how important Grimoire Nier was. Like it gives you a full rundown exactly of why and how One of Dragon Guard 3's endings created the Nier universe. That's like it spells it out for you in there. That's the connecting link. They never spell it out in the games ever. It's only in that book.
I've been like tangentially aware of this book because I've read like some of its translated entries on like the different wikias for it. So I'm on the Amazon page for the new revised edition of Grimoire Nier coming out next April, at least according to Amazon. The way they describe this is interesting. I don't know if this is true or just the way they decided to list the page. It is a comprehensive guide to Nier Replicant version 1.22, etc., with characters, weapons, maps, and more. Hundreds of full-color pages, illustrations, concept, story exploration. And at the end, it says also includes bonus short stories and volume-exclusive extras. Like, it treats it more like a strategy guide first, and then the short story second. Is that kind of how it was thought of in Japan?
That's how Grimoire Nier is like a good, like, the majority of it is like a strategy guide, like with a lot of like pretty artwork, but around the fringes, it has a lot of like lore as well. Like,
I guess I always thought of it as like the Grimoire Nier is a collection of short stories, but it sounds like it's more that it just contains a collection of stories.
Wasn't there like those short stories that they sold as like a bonus gift in the official Square Enix merchant store?
I don't know. I'd have to look into it. I don't think the short stories in Grimoire Nier were ever like split off into a separate product of their own. I'm not aware of that, but I could be wrong. But you know, some of the stories that they some of the content in Replicant, like the new re-release of Replicant, was like inspired by content of the original edition of Grimoire Nier, and then they like kind of adapted it and fleshed it out more. And then those like stories that's why it's called the revised edition. And this one to make it more accurately reflect about the final thing when they pushed forward with that new content and the re-release of Replicant. It sounds weird. It is kind of weird, but that's how it is.
Well, thank you everyone for joining me today for another episode of the Tetracast. Hope you all are enjoying Live. If you guys have picked it up and are playing through it like we have, leave your comments at the comment section of this podcast entry about your thoughts on Live, and we'll wrap around to it when we find time. As we've said, we do have all the guides up on the site that Chow, Paige, and Alex have put together, and they are feature complete for the whole game. We'll touch them up as we go through it just to make sure that they're polished out and as convenient as possible for you guys. We will reconvene next week to talk about all the things Xenoblade 3 and potentially Digimon. All the other news that we've talked about is up on the site. You can follow RPG's site on all the social channels at Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and Instagram. Just search for RPG site and you should find us. You can join our Discord just by going to discord.gg/RPG site. We will likely, I will confirm with our moderators or admins, have a Xenoblade 3 specific channel for discussion there. We will have very strict rules in our Discord about any spoilers for that game, as it is a very story-heavy game. And be careful up around the internet as well, because things are out and about. So just use caution when browsing the web. And until you hear from us next time, stay safe and take care, and we'll talk to you then.